Alrighty. I think we're live. Don't quote me on that, but here we go. And yes, my hair is a mess. It's 9 o'clock at night, and I have one of these headsets on, you know, that the people at like theaters have when there's like a live presentation. They're like, sound check, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I just have this on so you can hear me until my new microphone comes in that just clips to my shirt. So, I look like a dork, but that's okay, because hopefully soon we'll switch cameras and we can avoid this hot mess going on here. But this is Tucker with Tucker Sewing and Quilting, and I'm just coming to you live this night, because it's almost, you know, almost midnight, for me anyway. And this is my glory hour. This is when I do a lot of my quilting and things like that. So I just thought I would sort of bring you along on my process and chat with you all while I'm basting this quilt on the machine that should have been done weeks ago for a wedding this weekend. You know, there's procrastination for you. So let me make sure that this microphone is working. No, it isn't. Maybe it would help if I turned it on. Hang on. Is it even on? I don't know. Is it on? Here we go. Where's the receiver? I don't know. Okay, well, the blue light's on. Let me check this. Oh, there we go. Okay. Let's see. We'll see if that's any better. All right, we'll give that a minute. So who do we have in here? We have Marie says, hi, Tucker and friends in the chat. Good evening. Hello, Marie. We have Peace, Love, and Quilting, and that is Courtney. She says, hi, Tucker. Debt-free quilters in here. Hey, hey, let me check this mic. Oh, this mic still ain't working. If it still ain't working, I'm just going to give the whole thing up in a minute. Hang on. Yeah. You aren't working. Hello? Oh, I guess I really do have to turn it on. Okay, let's try that. Can you hear me now? Hello. 1, 2, 3. I don't know. All right, let's try that. Let's see. We have Slowing Down Joe is in here. Hello. Hi, Tucker and everyone. So, we have Jeanette in here. How are you? All right, let's just check this out. I don't know what's going on with this microphone. This is why I need a new one. I'm about ready to throw it out. I don't know what's going on with this thing. Anyway, it was working 5 seconds ago. Hello? Can you hear me? I don't know. It's going to get thrown out the window in 5 seconds. So anyway. Okay. I guess I'll just have to talk louder. Well, then out the door it goes, if it ain't gonna work. Okay, we'll try one more time. Hello. All right, that's it. I'll just have to talk really, really loud when I'm explaining things. So, let's see. Well, that's a disappointment. I spent money on it and now it don't work. But anyway, I don't know what that light says. Maybe I should have kept the directions. See, that's what I get. So, we have some people in here, and I'm going to quilt. So, let me tell you a little bit about this quilt. This quilt is for a dear friend of the family, and the girl that is getting married on Saturday, she actually used to be my babysitter. So, this quilt is very, very special, and it's going to a very, very special person. So, hang on. Things are happening, and I'm like, okay. So, this quilt is for a very special person, and I'm trying to find my book. Here it is. The pattern that I used is the mesmerized quilt. featuring the black dress 2 fabric designed by Natalia Bonner. Let me hold it up. There we go. Now, y'all know me. I am keeping it real. Okay? You know, I have kits that I was going to put this. Let me start over. I was going to put this pattern and kit on my website to be available. And when I unloaded my studio, I somehow missed over it and didn't put it on the website yet. This quilt fit the colors that, you know, the family friend liked and things like that. And when I started to put the quilt together, I found that the pattern had some very confusing directions. So I'm actually glad that I did not put the whole entire kit with the pattern on my website. What I'll probably end up doing is breaking down the fat quarter bundle and separating the pattern and just selling that separately, because the pattern, it was sort of confusing. And that's all I'm going to say about that. And no shade to Natalia Bonner or Basic Gray sewing patterns, but it was just a little confusing for me to read. But that doesn't mean it will be confusing to you. So, I just thought I'd say that. But the center of the quilt was actually 72 by 80 something. And the family friend, they have a big bed. So what did I do? Add borders, of course. You know, if your quilt is smaller than you'd like, you can do a string border, which is what I did, or you can just add solid plain borders to make a quilt bigger. So there's always something that you can do. I'm just checking. All right, let's see. All right, we have Tiffany's Quilting Life in here. Can't stay, but wanted to say hi real fast. Watch the replay. I'm in person teaching right now. Have a good live, Tucker. Well, you'll have to tell me all about it, Tiffany, a little bit later. So, good luck, and thank you. So, this quilt was put together in about a day and a half, the whole thing, and I think it measures 100 by 110. So it's a pretty big quilt. Thankfully, it was a simple pattern to put together, but even so, it should have been done weeks ago. So what we're going to do is put it on, switch cameras around here. I'm going to adjust this camera. So here we go. It's a little crooked. Hang on. Technical readjustment. There we go. Look at that. So I'm going to switch cameras. Oh, there we go. So you have 2 cameras on here, and we can see the beautiful quilt in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. And as you can see, it fills my long arm very, very well. So usually what that means with bigger quilts, that means that there's some fullness somewhere in the quilt. And in this case, it's in the borders. I find that with any pre-cut fabric, you have more stretch and things like that. And I did not have the opportunity to starch this fabric, so some things are a little full in the border. But that's okay, because I know a wonderful long armor who can handle that fullness. So, I'm going to, first of all, put my thread in the needle. If I can find it, here it is. And I just oiled my machine, which with Gammel's, it has a 5-minute oiling process. Stick that in here. You know what? I have an idea. Wait a minute. I think I know why this microphone isn't. Look at that. Maybe if I would do the right thing. Hang on. Now, how do I save it? Okay. Look at God. All right. Let's try that. Hang on. I'm checking to see if it worked. Ah, it worked. Oh my gosh. See, I'm so smart. Okay, this is how I usually work, right? I'm doing something, that I can just do without thinking, threading this needle, trying to anyway. And I'm thinking of things in the background. Normally I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I have so much other stuff to do, and I shouldn't even be doing this right now, but here I am. Things you think about in the background, and I just thought it would help if I changed the input source of my microphone. And look at that, it helped. So we're back on with sound, and I look like a theater kid with this microphone. So I have loaded in some glide thread, and the thread just broke. With cotton thread, I find on my gamble that I need a tighter tension, and the tighter tension allows me to go faster. So the tension was a little too tight, and the thread broke as I was pulling it through, so I have to thread this needle again. And it would help if I turned the light on. Ooh, for any of you gamble people out there, I just ordered some new approach feet that come on here, and I ordered the full set, so that means I have the glide foot, the spoon foot. Oh, I just hit the microphone. I'm not used to this thing on my head. Sorry. So I have all the different feet, the trapunto feet, the couching foot, things like that. So I'm very excited to try these new feet. The only time I've tried them is at the Gamble booth in Virginia. And I was very, very happy. I'm like, where's the bobbin? And it's over here. So this is just sort of an impromptu live stream, not just casual, not too professional or, nothing about that. So we're just going to baste. So here we go. So what I've already done is, I don't think you can see, but I have already basted down my batting. And you can see here that this is a very large quilt. Normally, if I have a quilt that I can reach with both of my arms, I do not baste down my batting because I have control of this area. If I see this corner up here starting to slip, I can just adjust it and hold it while I'm stitching it down. But if I'm the whole way down at the left end and I see the right corner starting to slip, I can't run and adjust it as quick. So what I do with bigger quilts especially is I just baste down the batting just to hold it in place and just to give me sort of like an extra hand. So let me get this quilt adjusted up here. Apparently I didn't do that right. And also that basting line, which I use the channel locks on, gives me a perfectly straight line to line things up with. So that is a help too. Now let me line this up. All right. So on the bottom left of your screen, you can see the main camera. You can see me down here. What I like to do when I load my quilts is I like to look down the length of my long arm to see how straight a seam is, because most of your quilts are put together in blocks, so there's always going to be a linear seam that runs across your belly bar most of the time. So I like to look down the length of my machine to see if one of those seam lines is straight, and if it's not, I come down here and sort of rub it into place and push the quilt around to make that line straight. So down here at the corner, I'm going to bring my machine down here. I have lined the quilt up at the top on that line, and I have straightened the seam out linear to my frame. Now, can you see all this fullness down here? It's a little bit extra fullness. So I'm just going to demonstrate. If I was to start up here, right, and pretend I'm stitching along, and I was to push, and my hopping foot, as it stitches, it pushes the fabric ahead a little bit. So it's pushing the fabric ahead, pushing the fabric ahead. There is a good, I would say, ½ an inch worth of, extra fabric here. Now, here's a question and answer for the comments. Where do you think that fabric will go? Right? It won't be incorporated to what we just stitched. No, it will push this border down. So if you keep doing this, at the end of your quilt, when you go to baste the bottom of it, you're going to have a frowny face. And nobody wants a frowny face on a quilt. They just want like a neutral face or a perfectly straight line. So if we line up that seam where we want it, and let me see, take a pin and pin the top where you want it. So that's what I'm going to do right now. Sticking a corsage pin where I want it. And if I start my basting down here at this straight line, pull up my bobbin thread, go to regulated, and if I just take my thumb and push in front of the nose of my machine, doing that just sucks in just a little bit of extra fullness. When you push ahead a little bit, it takes about 1 or 2 extra threads of fabric up under the needle, and every thread counts. So just by pushing a little bit in front of my hopping foot, and this seam isn't even pressed. Oh, go on. I'll have to talk to the piecer. I don't know. Just by pushing just a little bit, in front of your hopping foot, and right there I just ended on my corsage pin, and there was no pleats, no bubbles, nothing. So all that extra is in the quilt where it's supposed to be, and it's evenly distributed. So when you're quilting the quilt, you know, a 1/4 or a 1/2 an inch, that will be quilted up with the puffiness of the batting, and you'll never know that there was extra fullness there. But just the direction of basting, you know, from the belly bar up or the belly bar down can really affect how, or the pickup bar down, excuse me, can really affect the end result of your quilt. So I'm going to switch my channel lock direction, put my corsage pin back, see if I can't hit my microphone again. And I'm just basting across. And what I'm going to do is roll the quilt down so you can see what's going on here. There we go. Look at that. Alrighty. So I'm going to do this, put it back, and then put my channel lock back on. And then line the quilt top back up with the line because it shifted a little bit. Okay, another thing I want to talk about is this quilt. Hang on, I'm going to call. This quilt, the border has a lot of piecing in it, right? And if you can see here, some of these ends might start to come apart. So if you're a long armor or even basting your own quilt on your home machine and you're stitching around that edge, using a tighter stitch will help to hold those seams in place as you're working with your quilt. Also, if you see a seam that's coming open, make sure you press it, you know, put it in the direction that it's supposed to be going, and just going over the seam and back, sort of like a back stitch over that seam, helps to really secure those threads and close that seam. Right, see right there was one that started to come open, so I'm just gonna back stitch, and I need to adjust. I was starting to adjust with the wrong one, so here we go. All right, let me back up a little bit. Right here, I pieced this quilt with purple thread because, you know, why not? So you can start to see some purple thread. So I'm just going to adjust that and make sure my seam is going in the right direction. I'm going to stitch over it to nail it in place and then stitch back over it like a back stitch to hold that in place. That one was Now, let's talk about, while I'm going down the line here, let's talk about what causes that. Um, when you're, when you're showing off a quilt, when you're moving a quilt, all of that stuff puts extra tension and pressure on your quilt, which then puts pressure and tension on your seams. When you show a quilt, to your friends or your spouse or things like that, and you grab a hold of the edges, that actually ends up stretching out your quilt even more around the corners and things like that. And then, when you show your quilt too much without any stabilization, then your quilt becomes, a warped quilt, and your long armor has to take an Excedrin. But anyway, how can you avoid that? When you're finished with a quilt, just taking 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, like finishing lap stitch, the whole way around your quilt can really make a difference when it comes time to quilting. And it'll save your long armor the headache. Okay, let me line that up. All right. Let me roll this back up so I can get to the full potential of my quilting area. When I go to do an edge to edge, line the sides back up. This is a big quilt. The other week I quilted my quilt, and that one I'm not going to sell this time. It was a panel. Maybe it would help if I put a channel lock on. It was a panel, and actually, hang on, I think I might have a picture. How much of the camera can you see? Wait a minute. All right, let me switch cameras a minute and move it and adjust. I'm going to show you my quilt that I did, if I can find it. Right here it is. This one I did for me. This was just a, well, technically it was a wide back, and I saw this at the quilt show with Becca and Donna, and I was like, I need this now. So I'm going to show it to you lengthwise, but it actually gradiates from light at the top to dark. And this is a huge quilt, but, this is my quilt, but, it goes to show you that you don't have to use fabric in one way and you can use it in another. So I'll have to take some good pictures of that, because I know I look like a penguin trying to hold a grizzly bear, but that just gave you an idea of what's going on with that. So let me switch back and get this on here. Okay. All right. So I've reached the bottom here, and what I'm actually going to do is go to this camera. All right, I can't even show it. So I'm just going to go across the quilt now, smoothing out everything, making sure everything is still laying flat, still linear with my long arm, and then I'm just going to baste across. And was it last Monday I was live? I can't remember. Somebody asked me about fully basting quilts. And I do fully baste my quilts. It's just at this point that I need to know what might come, right? If I am quilting, especially customer quilts, and I'm floating the quilt and I get to the bottom and there is so much fullness in the bottom border that I want to go crawl in a hole and cry, I don't need that. But if I baste the quilt ahead of time, I can always fix that problem before I get there with basting and working up fullness and things like that. So yeah. So that is the first row basted. Oh, I'm so glad I got my microphone working. All right. I'm going to trim the threads and then roll the quilt. So, let me answer some questions. If I can pull my chat up. All right, let's see. We have Roxanne Sexton in here, and she asks, do you have computerization on your machine? Yes, my machine is a Gamma Statler Stitcher. I'm trying to think what size it is. It is a 36-inch machine. Yep. So I do have full computerization on my Statler. All right. And then we have Tracy from the Sewing Channel in here. Tucker, is that your Christmas... Or wait, I can't even read that far. Tucker, is that your Quiltmas quilt on the wall? Let me show you what she's talking about. And I just hit the microphone again. Over on the wall, my design wall, and don't mind my hot mess. I'm getting a new desk and I'm trying to clean it up. Is all of the ugly fabric that I received from 11 other wonderful content creators. And I was trying to, you know, film some shots and get some thumbnails. So, no, my Christmas quilt is very, very much packed away, waiting to be quilted tomorrow. So, I can't wait to quilt it. All right, gonna roll this up like that. And let's see. Do I have computerization? Yep. Let's see. That is quite beautiful, Tucker. Thank you. Yep, that's gorgeous. Thank you. You know, it's amazing how in quilting you can take one thing and completely disregard its actual use and, you know, turn it into something, you know, completely different. You know, that quilt was supposed to be, here we go, I got a cough again. That panel, or I should say, is technically a wide back, right? And it's meant to go on the back of quilts. And, you know, I completely flipped that around and, you know, used it as the top of my quilt and used regular yardage on the back. So it just goes to show you that there's more than one way to skin a cat, basically. But it's just fun. We have fun. So I'm smoothing out my batting. And as you saw, I'm sure that this is a pieced backing. And apparently the piecer of the backing, myself, did not have the motivation nor the time to iron the seam. So what I'm doing is just going along and sort of massaging that seam open underneath the batting, because I do not want the seam to be going every other direction when I go to quilt it. So I'm just running my hand underneath the batting and smoothing it out as I go. There we go. I can feel it laying down now. There we go. So what I did when I rolled the quilt onto the machine is when that seam got to the belly bar, I stopped when that seam was still on the metal of my machine, and I just took my finger and pressed that seam open with my fingernail, and that works for me. All right, let me smooth this batting out as best as I can, because this is a Hot Mess Express that I had cut or hanging out for a couple days now. So, I'm like, what's this bump here? And I forgot that there's a seam there. All right. This is me every day in my studio. I can't even remember what I did 5 seconds ago. So, I'm just going to lightly sort of fluff out the quilt, just like you do with your, with your sheets on your bed. I'm not pulling, I'm not tugging, I'm just fluffing. So, getting everything straightened out again. So, if you can see, I think you can. You can see pretty well. Hopefully. Right here, there is a seam. Right here, there is the same exact seam. And I'm just going to come down here and look across my belly bar. The bar that touches your belly is called the belly bar, and this bar is called your pickup bar. So I'm looking in between both bars to make sure that the seam on my belly bar is straight, and all the other seams in between the two rollers are also straight. And everything's looking pretty straight. I'm just going to sort of rub everything around, pick up any loose threads, and then get ready to start again. So, we switch cameras by clicking a button. Look at that. See, look here. I'm going to show you the behind the scenes here. This is called a stream deck here, and all I have to do is click that button, and it changes the scenes. So, I don't even have to go over to my computer. It's just one less step I have to take. So, let's see. I can't wait to see what you did with the ugly fabric. You're so talented, and I'm in awe of your work. Well, thank you, Tracy. Thank you, thank you. So, now, usually when I baste, and as you can see here, I straightened everything out again, but I'm going to show you that there's still some extra fullness in this, right? If I'm basting a flat quilt, I am just going to baste down the sides from the pickup bar to the belly bar, across and up. But in this case, I'm actually going to do the opposite. I'm going to come down here, maybe. You know what? I'm actually going to change my mind. I'm going to show you how to, if it's not possible, how to baste from your pickup bar to your belly bar. So, make sure that you get as far as your machine can reach, this seam right here, make sure you get that in the area that you want it so that there's no fullness from that point down, right? So what you're going to do is find that point and then stick a pin in it, right? So now all of the fabric, I just stuck my pin through my thread. Isn't that funny? All right. So all of this extra fabric in here is confined to the space between your massage pin. So I'm going to come up to where my last basting stitch was, pull up the thread. I don't think I'm going to turn my channel locks on this time. So I'm going to start stitching for, maybe a couple inches. Now, I'm trying to see how much of this you can see. Okay. There will be about 3/8 of an inch of extra fabric on the left or right side of where you basted. All you're going to do is grab that fabric from behind your needle and your hopping foot, and you're just going to sort of pull that up. And that's sort of doing the same thing that pushing on your fabric did. It's just pulling in a couple extra threads of fabric and working that fullness up. So I'm about 6 inches away from that pin, and we're going to get there, and there's no fullness when I come to that pin. So just working, I'm going to stick this right in here. Maybe not. There we go. Just working with that fabric and, in a certain direction can really work wonders in, pulling up fullness. So I'm just going to take some single stitches across. And right now I have my channel lock on. So I'm just guiding the machine in the right direction. Alrighty, here at the end, I'm just going to take a couple extra security stitches and take my channel lock off. And I'm using my thumb, so I'm pushing, see there, right here. I'm going to turn my machine off so I don't stitch my finger. Right there where my finger is pushing, That is the very front of my machine. There's only about an inch where the needle goes down to the front of the machine. So what I'm doing is putting about 2 inches from my thumb to the needle and just putting slight pressure. I'm not putting like a bag of rocks, in front of it. I'm just putting like a little bit of pressure, sort of like you would put on, a freshly cut wound. Not enough to hurt yourself, but enough to stop it. So just pushing down. Going to secure that seam. It's coming open. Hang on, there's a little bit of extra fullness in the batting. That happens too sometimes. And we're right back up at the top where our last basting stitch was, with no pleats or tucks. So this is the process, that long armers take. And this, straightening out and pushing with your thumb and things like that set you up for success. And every time I go live, every time I show somebody that how I baste the quilt, it just, I can't stress enough how this sets you up for success. Any amount of, I'm just going to jump in the camera here. I think you can see me. Any amount of fullness between this basting stitch and this basting stitch is stabilized, right? It's not going anywhere. It's not going up. It's not going down. So when you're quilting, or when your long arm is quilting, you can, maneuver your fabric and work in that fullness, right? When your quilt quilts, the batting takes up fullness. And just by you moving your hand and moving the quilt as, the machine is quilting, that also takes up fullness. And it works wonders, let me tell you. I'm going to share a story. And I had a quilt come in one time, and the majority of the quilt was pinwheel blocks. Now, y'all know pinwheel blocks, depending on how they're made, they can be on the bias, right? So, apparently, this pinwheel quilt was made on the bias. So, with anything biased, there is bound to be a lot of fullness, right? And I'm going to switch cameras. Maybe. There we go. Try to get this machine up out of the way. Okay. So there was a lot of fullness in this quilt, right? And it was a row of pinwheels, and then a row of something else, and then a row of pinwheels and a row of something else. And the rows of something else, they were fine. They laid flat and everything else. But the row of pinwheels, let me tell you what, they did not lay flat, and they were something else. But that quilt, I thought, to myself, I'm going to have to send this back to this lady, and she's going to be so disappointed, and she's going to tell all her friends that this 17-year-old kid does not know what he's doing, and he's a scam. So I got myself together, and I said, okay, let's just try it. So instead of basting with my regular, 12 stitches per inch basting, I just put in for like a 1.5 inch basting stitch that if it didn't turn out right, I could pull it apart. And I did everything that I'm showing you now, the pushing with your thumb, the, easing in and things like that. And it basted wonderful. And as the machine was quilting, I turned the speed down, and I was, finger dancing it and moving the fabric underneath the needle. And by the time that quilt was quilted, it laid flat. And I was so amazed on how the extra mile, really made a difference. So, and I'm sure if I would have used, if I would have had a spoon foot to put on my machine, I could have turned the speed up a little bit. But at that point, I did not have the spoon foot. So I'm just fluffing the quilt out a little bit, making sure everything's still doing all right. Getting these puckers out of the batting. Making sure that the quilt top isn't underneath what I'm going to be stitching, because that has happened before. So get that out. So what I like to do, and you're probably seeing me do it on both ends, is I do not clamp my backing fabric when I am basting the quilt. If I clamp, I'm down here by the way, if I clamp this and put tension on it before I baste this, what do you think will happen when I take off the tension when I go to roll the quilt? The quilt's going to actually shrink in a little bit because you're releasing that tension, right? So if I don't put any tension on it and everything's free and floating, when I go to quilt and everything's basted and then I put tension on it, then it'll give me that taut tension, not, you know, just loosey-goosey laying on there tension. So I don't put my clamps on when I am basting. So let me see. We have Quiltessa in here. Hey, Quiltessa. Let's see. June Hansen said, "Thank you, Tucker, for all the teaching that you have given tonight. Has helped a lot, and let me see, I can't read that far. And I'm going to use these tips forever. It means so much. Hugs." Well, thank you, June Hansen. I love, you know, coming on here and sharing what I know, and you know, that's what we're supposed to do. Share what we know with each other, right? So, it's my pleasure. All right. Enough of that. I rolled the quilt and adjusted that. So, back to what I was saying, you know, when I pull on this each side of the quilt, that just ensures that there's no major wrinkles in the back of the quilt. Because if there was a major wrinkle and I put a little bit of tension on it when I quilt, it's probably not going to get that wrinkle out. But just by me pulling on each side of the quilt, that straightens and flattens the backing fabric out on the rails. So here we go again. And I need to switch the camera. Look at that. All right. Here we go. So, what am I going to quilt on this quilt? I have no idea. Since this quilt has to get done by Saturday at 2:30, which I'm, you know, dreading putting the binding on, but, you know, it is what it is. I'm trying to make a decision here right now on what I want to actually put on the quilt. If I run an edge to edge, I thought my channel locks were on. If I run an edge to edge on this quilt, my Statler can knock this thing out in 2 hours. But if I do custom on it, I want to do custom that isn't too, you know, feminine and isn't too masculine, because, you know, this is for a future husband and wife in a couple days, and it's gonna end up on their bed. So I want them to both love it, right? So I'm trying to pull designs out of my freehand library, and I'm trying to pull designs out of my computer library, and, you know, try to make the best decision possible. So I'm debating what I want to do. And I asked Mom what she thought, and then, you know, she picks something completely opposite of what I was going to do, but, you know, it is what it is. So I'll figure something out. So I'm just, once again, pushing with my thumb. And once again, no fullness or puckers coming up to that other stitching. All right, I can't even find my scissors. All right, let me switch back. I don't even know. These camera switching things. And you're seeing my machine move by itself. My belts are connected. That's how my channel locks are engaged. And I just grab a hold of the belts when I'm, you know, down here, and I can move the belts either way. So, who do we have here? Around about it. Hello, Tucker and everyone. Hello, how are you? We have Jamie Wallen in here, or Janine Wallen. Sorry for that. Thanks for the lesson. This really helps. I'm glad. let's see, a lot of quilters have no idea what long armor does to make their quilts come out nice. They think you just load it and run the program, but it can be very tedious to fight with the fabric. Yes, yes, yes. Quiltessa is speaking the truth. Uh, a lot of people think, oh, you have a computerized long arm. You just, put the programs in and walk away, right? That is very far from the truth. If you have a very flat quilt, and I mean it has to be as flat as a pancake, um, then you can walk away. But even then, you find yourself, coming back and making sure that everything's laying straight and everything's quilting up all right. And, you're sort of like how I would presume, a mother would be with, their kid, right? May even know that they probably know that the kid's going to be fine. They're still, checking up on them, making sure they're all right. Do they need anything? Are they hurt? That's sort of how I imagine it in my mind. So, and then, you have those problem quilts like I was telling you about, and you have to sit there and watch every single stitch and maneuver the fabric so it doesn't go over a seam with 15 layers of fabric. It's a tedious process, but I do not know one long armor that would trade what they do for the world. So it's fun. It's fun, especially when you do. And my machine's shaking. Sorry, or the camera. It's especially fun when you do quilts for other people because you get to see quilts that you yourself would never ever dream of making or thought that the pattern even existed and things like that. It's amazing to see other people's work and how amazing the quilting community is. So, let's see. What about something with leaves? Yeah, I was thinking about leaves. I actually have, well, I have your, I have your design in there, Quiltessa, that you use all the time. And Mom really liked that one. And then I have crosshatch, and I have a swirl one, and then I also do have something with leaves. And something with leaves, I can do that freehand, and that'll just add the little more custom touch. So I think I have about a row and a half left to do, which is good because I soon need to cut this thing off anyway. So, yeah. So if you guys have any questions in the chat, just drop them in there about loading or quilting or anything like that. And I need a pen. Just let me know and I'll answer them for you. Any questions about the gamel? Anything. What else? Also, these skills, I should say, can also, be used for people that base their quilts at home, or they don't have a long arm or don't have the funds to send them out, right? There's a quilt, actually, it's the quilt that I'm doing by Jacqueline Dijon, the Enchanting Stars. That quilt has a lot of round piecing in it, right? And obviously that is giving me so much fullness, I can't even imagine how I'm going to, work that in. I'll just use some Quilter's Dream Puff batting and that'll take care of it, right, Quiltessa? Anyway, so I think what I'm going to do is find the smallest point of the quilt. If the less fullest part, or the least fullest part, there we go, it's late. If the least fullest part is 53 inches, I'm going to mark a 53-inch square on the back of my quilt and, use this method to, condense the extra fullness in that area. And that's something that, the people that do this on their floors and things like that can do too, right? Measure the smallest area of your quilt, mark it out on a square, and then just take pins and pin every half an inch until you have all that extra, if there is any, worked into that, 53-inch square, or however big or small your quilt is. That can help keep your quilt square. That can give you an idea of, you know, the type of quilting design you're going to do, right? Because if your quilt has some fullness in it, the denser your quilting designs are, the more fullness it's going to take up, right? So just keep that in mind. And then also, I found out that, well, I knew this for a while, and I've actually been hoping that somebody would send me one local here, but that never turned out. Most long armors offer a basting service where they don't actually quilt your quilt. They just fully baste your quilt top for like hand piecers and, you know, avid machine quilters and things like that. And I would love to do that. And I might actually try it for myself. But, you know, that's another service that long armors offer too, is basting. Not quilting, just basting. Sort of like what I'm doing now, but instead of having, you know, 26 inches of unquilted area, they put more basting stitches back and forth. So maybe only like a 4-inch area. Things like that. Just enough to hold everything together while you're quilting it on your home machine. All right, let's see. All right, let's see. Please say a prayer for our 3-month-old grandson. He has the C word, and we had him here Saturday. Oh my. Well, keep Guess Who Nancy's grandson in your prayers and thoughts. Yes. All right. Rolling this again, and I need to lift my pickup bar. And we're almost at the bottom. I can see the bottom border. So what I'm going to do is baste a little short. So what I like to do, oh good, okay. Till I'm done, we'll have plenty of time. Okay, let me just make sure my stitching is in the right place. Okay, it is. So I'm going to switch cameras a minute. There we go. Beep, beep, there we go. Oh, it's so fun to click those buttons. Okay. So if I have a border like this, and I can't always fit it in my quilt, what I like to do is baste the border to make sure that it's straight. Because I would rather have, you know, the border be, or the seam that the border is pieced on look straight, than have the actual border be straight. And I know that doesn't sound, you know, very ethical or, you know, whatever, but it'll make sense in a minute when I get this seam pressed open. So let me lay this batting on here. Flatten it out. Make sure the seam is flat. Okay. I don't know what's going on with this batting. Okay, there it goes. All right, so as you can see, there is a stop border on this quilt, right? Now, let me lay this out so it looks flat. Oh, wait, it is flat. Okay. Right? If I was to lay this out, and I'm looking at the camera, on your camera view and in real life, this border is straight. And if I was to baste it, I just hit the microphone again. If I was to baste it, it would come out straight, great, everything's fine. But this is because the quilt lays flat, right? Sometimes you get quilts that look like this. Okay, I'm just saying that for an example, right? That border is not very straight. Let's imagine that this fullness isn't here, right? And let's imagine that there's extra fullness in this border. If I quilt this like this, you're going to say, oh, you know, something's a little wrong with this quilt, or that wasn't pieced very well. But sometimes you can, you know, readjust your fabric and take in a little bit and adjust. So if I make this look straight, and there's extra fullness in this border, and I need to take a pleat here on one of these seams, that's better than having a wonky stop border or a wonky seam, right? Because your eye notices the wonky, piecing of it before it would notice the hemmed seam or things like that. So that's what I always like to do if I have a quilt with a very distinct stop border. So let me pull this like that. And switch cameras again because I apparently don't have a memory. All right. And then we'll soon be done. Alrighty, so I'm going to stop right about here and put my channel lock on. And I'm going to start doing my single stitches, right? So right now my stitches are lining up with that seam. So I know that when I am in here, my stitches need to be within about 1/8 or 1/4 inch of this black seam right here. And you can see my fingers moving along here like a spider. And I'm just making sure and adjusting that fabric to make sure that it stays in place. And in the bottom left corner of your screen, you can see me over here with my machine. I have my channel locks on, and the camera's shaking and everything else because, the frame is not letting my machine move. So we know that this border here is within 1/16 of an inch of perfect straightness. Okay, let me adjust this a little bit. I forgot to fluff this corner out apparently. And this is what I do with customer quilts too. Like I said, going the extra mile and things like that. And, I feel that it's, my job to give you the best version of your quilt back after you get it, right? You want your quilt to be as straight and square and everything else as possible, right? And so do I. If I was to send out a quilt that was so wonky and whatever, I think I'd go insane. So for both me and you, I, make your quilt as square as possible, and I take these steps with everybody's quilt. And it's just fun. It's fun to work through problems and to problem solve and things like that. And I probably sound like a weirdo, but, I think we all do a little bit of that and find that entertaining and fun because who doesn't love a good problem to solve, right? All right. I'm going to read some comments here. Let's see. Tucker Sewing and Quilting. Shirley here. Love watching long arm stitching. I use my domestic and I do hoop edge to edge. Hardest part for me is laying out the quilt and basting the layers together. Yeah. Like I said, long armors should anyway do, basting. And especially for people that have like a unique hoop frame and things like that, that would come in handy because they have to, clamp the backing and, things like that. And they don't have rollers to keep their backing square or their quilt top square or things like that. So there's, another reason or, place where the long arm or basting would come in handy. But, so that's that answer. All right, let's see. Vroom, back to the other side. All right, Tucker. Wear the microphone. Right. Wear the microphone when you aren't filming so I'll be used to it. Yeah. Walk around and then everyone will think, boy, did he forget to take off his headset or something? Right. I might have to do it. So, down here at the end, and for the most part, this border is pretty square and pretty flat. There's a couple areas down here where I see a little bit of fullness, but that, remember, we can work in with our pushing methods, and I'm going to show that in a minute. So, going to get this here, take a stitch, and get started. And I don't even think alright, I'm fine. Alright, so I don't have my channel locks on because I know this seam. When I piece this border together, see here, it's like a 1/4 inch of extra. When you do a string border sometimes with, exact 1/2 inch things, there's always a 1/4 of an inch that sticks off on one end. So as you can see, there might be a little bit of fullness here. So if there's fullness on the right side of your quilt that you're stitching, you're just going to put some pressure on the left side of your machine head, right? And if there's extra fullness on the left side, you'll put pressure on the right side. Just a little bit of pressure that helps to draw in a couple extra stitches at a time. And I have my channel lock on, so I'm trying to keep everything within my seam allowance here, and that seam was coming open. So yeah, in the beginning of this I said that my desk was a hot mess express when Tracy said about the ugly quilt. Finally, my desk situation has been solved, so hopefully by next week sometime I'll be getting a new desk delivered, a bigger desk. So that means I can finally set my desk up the way that I, want it. And now I'm going to have some room to do some actual live sew-in chats instead of just Tucker on here talking about nothing, basically. So yeah. So I'm almost through here. So this is pretty good. I only had to adjust my channel lock one time, just a little tiny bit. And which way does this seam go? I don't even know. Let me flip it around here. There we go. Wait, there we go. So this quilt was very, very square at the bottom, and that's because when we were working down the sides, we were making sure that everything was staying square, staying nice and straight, and we got a good result at the bottom of the quilt, right? So you can see, and I'm going to switch cameras. Let me send this thing across here. I turn the light out. You can see in the camera that the bottom of this quilt is very straight, very square, and that is what we look for, right? So yes. All right. Well, I was going to do something else and I completely forgot. Oh. So I am not going to quilt this quilt tonight. And you can't even see my head. So I'm not going to quilt this quilt tonight. I got a squirrel moment. So what I like to do when I have a quilt on the long arm that I'm not going to quilt right away per se, I like to release the tension on it. To me, I think in my mind anyway, I don't know if this is right or not, that it's going to stretch out the backing fabric. So if I just loosen the tension on the backing fabric a little bit, it just droops here. And then when in the morning when I come back, all I have to do is tighten it up a few clicks and I'm ready to go. So I'm going to trim the batting off the bottom here, trying not to cut the seam. There we go. And then I'll roll back to the start and then I'll be ready for tomorrow. I need to get my scissors sharpened. All right. Here we go. And then I'll read some comments and we'll be out of here. So I'll just go by so you can see the quilt. Let me adjust the camera a little bit. There we go. So in the bottom corner here, I did some embroidery, just to make the quilt a little more personal. The bride and groom's name and the date they're getting married with the embroidery machine. So yeah. Alrighty. And there's the top. So yeah. All right, let me adjust this thing again for the 15th time. All right. Let me get this over here. Pull the chat up. See, my Face ID doesn't even recognize me with this thing on. So, all right, let's see. All right. Words. Oh, here we go. All right. Around to it. Tucker sewing and quilting. Do you ever do a base stitch left to right in the middle or in other areas when you roll the quilt to keep your quilt square? Yes. This is actually, oh, I wasn't even in the frame, but that's okay. And look at my hair. That's okay too. It's almost time for bed. Yes. Doing these bigger basting stitches, helps, especially when I'm doing an edge to edge and the quilt is very flat. If I have a very, very full quilt in, per se, a double wedding ring, in those center parts with, the 4 pokes on each end, if those center parts are very full, what I do is just, use my 3/4 base stitch or 1/2 inch base stitch and just even out that fullness just to, baste it down. So yeah, basting on a long arm is your friend. It can help. It's sort of like 15 extra hands in a way, because each stitch, is an extra hand really. So, it really does come in handy. All right, Q. Question. What size is the quilt? It looks like an oversized king. The center of the quilt, now what did I do with the pattern? Didn't I just have it? Here it is. The center of the quilt is 72 by 84, and I have a 2-inch stop border, so that makes it 74 by 86. And then I have a, what did I cut this at? 12-inch string border, so that's about 100 by 110, things like that. So this technically is a king, but yeah, it's 110 by 110. I think the math is mathing right now. So yes. And another thing I just want to point out, sometimes here at Tucker Sewing and Quilting, the math does not math. Most of the times I come down here and it's like 12 at night or, things like that, and I'm cutting a quilt. And I come down here the next morning and I'm like, who cut this? Because this is 5 inches too short. So sometimes the math does not math here at Tucker Sewing and Quilting. So it's a pretty big quilt. All right, let's see. I did not see a troll. I don't even. Okay, well, if you reported and blocked, thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So anyway, yeah. I'm glad to have this quilt on my machine, and I'll probably decide what I'm going to do tonight, but I don't know. I know this, that if I let the machine stitch it out, the Statler can have this quilt off of my long arm within 2 hours of me hitting start. But if I do it, freehand, that might take a little longer. So yeah. So let's see. All right, let's see. Sorry for all the questions. Do you prefer your seams pressed to one side or pressed open, I would assume? Yep, pressed open. Or doesn't it matter? If for quilts like this, these seams were pressed, to one side or the other. That's because, there's only 2 layers of fabric up against one another. And I'm trying to itch my back. It's really itchy right now. Sorry about that. But when you have quilts like kaleidoscope quilts or quilts with, 16 different star points coming together, then is when, the quilter's machine is going to start to growl when it goes over those humps and bumps. Your machine stitches regular and it sounds, and then when you get over those lumps, if they're not pressed open, you start to hear, And then, you have your tension problems and your thread shredding and things like that. So normally when you have 4 fabrics coming together, I say, press to one side or the other. But when I have more than 4 fabrics coming together in one seam, I recommend pressing your seams open if you're going to send that quilt out to a long armer. If you're going to quilt that quilt yourself, by all means, press however you would like. But if you're going to send a quilt to me, 4 seams or more coming together, I would recommend pressing the seams open. And if you're going to press the seams open, I would recommend one of these pressing mats. You just put the seam right on this ridge here, and your iron just glides right on it, and it's a lot easier to press your seams open. And shout out to Sue GSD from the T-Quilts Retreat. She actually gave this press stick to me at retreat. So thank you very much, Sue. All right, let's see. Your friends will love the quilt. Yes, yes, yes. Let's see. Will you record quilting? I would like to see that before you give it as a gift. If I do some type of freehand on this quilt, absolutely I can record it. But if I do some computerized quilting, I might do just like, a short or a tiny little, 5-minute video of the machine quilting. But, so yeah. All right, everyone. So if that's all the questions, I will cut it off of here. All right. I like to see the quilting sometime, and I understand. Yep, you're fine. It's not that hard to record quilting now. Actually, before a couple weeks ago, actually, I used to use my phone, and I had a tripod wrapped around the little prong that I hold my scissors on, and I would just slide my phone in there. But now I have the wonderful GoPro attached, and all I have to do is just hit record, and all that information is stored on an SD card, and all I have to do is pop it out and plug it into my computer and hit upload. So it's a lot easier to record quilting videos now. All right. Thank you for taking time to answer my questions. You have answered great. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you asking questions, and I am always more than happy to answer questions. So if anyone's watching the replay later and they have any questions about quilting or the long arm or any process that I took in today's episode or video or whatever you'd like to call it, just drop it down in the comments and I'll respond as soon as I can, because it's a little crazy around here. So I need to get off my feet and turn these lights out and figure out what I'm going to quilt on this thing before tomorrow morning. So without any further ado, I'm going to cut it off. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe if you're new. And I can't wait to see you all next time. Whether that's a video or a live stream, it really doesn't matter. I'm just excited to be here and excited to, be here. Really, that's all. It's just unexplainable, for me to, it's an experience to just be able to pull my phone out and hit go live and be connected with a community of such, great people that, I can say what a fat quarter is and you know what I'm talking about. So it's just wonderful. So thank you all so very much for being here. Make sure you stay tuned because the 12 Days of Quiltmas is kicking off. And Tracy from the Sewing Channel, who was just here, is kicking it off on day 1, December 1st at 6:30 afternoon Eastern Time. 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on her channel. So make sure to check her video out, and she will direct you to the next person. And then I will be on December 12th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So be sure to watch everybody's videos and quilt out, everybody. So bye, everyone.